to erode our local networks of support and communication. So that's Bloomingdale. It has a grant. It's focused especially on those who have needs that cannot be met as far as the internet goes under their own means. And then there's Mount Pleasant, which is advantaged in a way that I can work on it because I live there. And it was kind of a project idea that I came up with when I moved there in May of last year. I thought, you know, I really want to get to know this neighborhood, and I think, you know, a really interesting way to do this would be to see what the interest is in organizing a community wireless network in Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant is a really wonderful area of DC. I strongly recommend you visit it if you haven't been. It's, they like to call themselves a village in the city, and it really is sort of that way because there's only one or two roads that go through, like you would use to pass from Mount Pleasant elsewhere. It's nestled on two sides by Rock Creek Park and Rock Creek, and it's got its very own strong character where, in addition to some nicer homes, it also has a lot of folks who are you know, immigrants to this country, especially Latino folks, a lot of San Salvadorians, a lot of Hondurans, a lot of Guatemalans, and a lot of local businesses along Mount Pleasant Street. So it's also a neighborhood that is very civically focused, very much focused on some self-reliance. And the model I'm pursuing in Mount Pleasant, because it's a bit more of a diverse area that has means and lack of means, is to have folks buy their own router, say, this is your router, it's your responsibility to keep it up, and it's your responsibility if you want to open it up to your neighbors so that it can spread internet access. If you would like, please donate your internet bandwidth. If not, that's okay. We've got about 6 routers up in the neighborhood right now. We have 2 gateways among those routers. And my hope is that this model, this totally decentralized model of sort of what I call the internet equivalent of neighbors sharing a cup of sugar, will prove pretty fruitful in such a civically focused neighborhood that would ultimately not require a really centralized management from me or anybody else, that eventually people could just take what responsibility they have over their router and the good they're providing to the community and use what knowledge I can give them and what help we can train people to know about their router to keep it up. So I think I've talked for a while now, and I look forward to questions.
Very good. We will have a long Q&A after everybody speaks. Our next guest is coming to us over the internet through the magic of Skype. Bruff Turner. Bruff?
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Is this actually working?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay. I can certainly hear you, yes.
Good.
Okay, my name is Bruff Turner. I'm going to talk about a rather different model. But first let me give you a little bit of background. I became interested in broadband in the late 1990s, or well, the mid-1990s. Had one of the very first cable modems in 1996. The other thing is my business involved a lot of international sales and international travel, so I got to see a lot of Europe and Asia between 1996 and 2008. And the final piece is in 2005 to around 2009, I got interested in public policy and trying to figure out why internet in Boston or New York was so much worse, what was available, than what was available in Stockholm, for example, or Tokyo, or Hong Kong, Seoul, and so forth. I ended up speaking on panels, talking about things with the DC crowd, organizing panels on of notable people, and generally surfing around the edges of the public policy debate for both fiber deployments and spectrum utilization. I became discouraged. I basically concluded that I'm not very good at politics. I'm an engineer, I'm an entrepreneur, and that there was nothing that I would be able to do in the public policy space that would result in change that I would consider adequate. So that's disappointing, but I'm an enthusiastic guy, so I spent a lot of time looking at community networks around the world, and there are some that are very interesting. Guifinet in Spain is a very interesting thing, possibly one of the largest community networks in the world. about 15,000 nodes connected. But I concluded that I couldn't see a way to change the world. It seemed to me that community networks were very much dependent on grants, which eventually weren't renewed, and volunteers who ended up going off to grad school. And in the end, it makes sense, and I hope Preston has tons of success. But for me, as an entrepreneur, I started thinking about a business approach. I have co-founded a number of businesses, several of which were successful, one of which went public, and I have a bias there. The other thing is I've observed over my lifetime, and I'm 60 now, so that the major changes that have been benefits for society have been invented perhaps in government-funded research labs, but all of the development and the pervasive change has been the result of competitive business activities. I think of the transistor invented at Bell Labs, but it was Fairchild Semiconductor, Texas Instruments, Intel, and 1,000 other silicon companies that gave us 60 or 70 years of the electronics evolution that's driven the computer industry, driven the communications industry, and indeed the internet at the fundamental level. Think about the internet. It's invented in the university, government-funded research, but the breakthrough stuff was Netscape, Sun Microsystems, Microsoft, Yahoo, Alta Vista, Google, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. That's what's created the pervasive social change. So was there something I could do? And I'm sitting there, now you know my background, so maybe you know why I'm hiding in Boston and not even visiting DC. In any case, sitting there saying, what could I do that would do an end run around the phone company monopoly, the cable company monopoly, the FCC, and Congress? Oh, okay. Well, I think that's what I'm about to describe to you. The final, basically, I have a startup business called Netblazer. We started May of 2010 with just a crazy idea. It's now 20 months later. We have a respectable business plan. We have several $100,000 of seed money investment. We have a pilot network operating with a bunch of customers connected. But we still have a ton of work to do. So this is absolutely a work in progress. It's early days, and it'll be maybe 3 years from now before you see us breaking out, and 4 or 5 years before we're in Washington, D.C. The other thing I should mention about starting any business is if you really intend to have an impact and be able to pull away from the crowd, you need to have an order of magnitude improvement in some dimension. Maybe it's technology, maybe it's distribution. So when I looked around at the broadband access problem in the US, saying who's screwed by the current duopoly and public policy situation, the answer, interestingly enough, is yes, consumers are screwed, but it's not that bad. Let me just try and share a image with you. Share screen. Give me 1 second. Can you see that? No. Can you see anything?
You. Hang on, I may have to change the...
The good news is I only had 1 or 2 images, and if they don't work, I don't need them. I can't hear you. Can you see something?
Can you take your camera and aim at the screen?
Okay, let me proceed. If the image shows up, that's great. And if not, let me describe what I'm trying to show. This is a picture, somewhat stylized, of a neighborhood, a business neighborhood in Boston. And what it shows is the people who are screwed by the broadband duopoly in the US. Much, much more so than residences, which are absolutely at a disadvantage. It's medium and smaller businesses. The picture I was trying to show is of two buildings in Boston's Back Bay, buildings which are 100 yards apart, 1 football field apart. The building on the right, 111 Huntington Avenue, affectionately known as the R2D2 building, is anyone who's a tenant there has a real advantage because there are 7 different companies that own their own fibers into that building. So you have service available not just from Verizon or Comcast, but also from level 3, Cogent, AboveNet, Sedera Networks, Veroxity, and somebody else. So there's a ton of competition there. And your price to get 100 megabit committed data rate business service is little more than you would pay if you were in a backbone data center. It's extremely competitive. If you're 100 yards away at 177 Huntington Avenue, this is a 26-story concrete office building owned by the Christian Science Church and rented out to businesses, Boston businesses, but they only had Verizon. More recently, they've got Comcast. But when I went and interviewed people in that building as to what kind of service they were actually getting and what they were paying, and then compare the price per megabit per second per month, what do you think the price difference was? It was a factor of 38 more expensive if you were 100 yards away, if you had a duopoly instead of competition. And this business of 30 times to 40 times price difference of what people actually pay for business internet connectivity is true in every major US city, all the top 50 markets. There are a few buildings which are, quote, on net for competitive fiber providers, but that's typically about 3% of the commercial office structures. The other 97% of the buildings have either just the phone company or they have the duopoly, and the price difference is 30 times to 40 times. So we decided, for a number of reasons, this being a major one, that it would make more sense to start serving business customers than residential customers. Now, as you'll see when I talk technology, the technology is a bit complicated to use initially, so again, business departments with IT setups are easier, and while I fully expect to get to residential markets 5-6 years from now as the technology improves, this is something we can do now. It's desperately needed, and of support funding us while we develop the technology we need to blow this out even further. So let me kill that and give up on screen sharing, go back to my mug, if you want to look at my mug. Screen sharing, interesting. Cancel. Okay. So, can you see my face?
Yes. Yes. Where's the microphone?
Okay. So, what is Netblazer offering? We're selling to, initially, we're selling to medium and smaller businesses, which we define as businesses between 5 and 200 employees. Now, this is going to sound flaky, but what we're offering them is a bit different. We're not offering a standard internet connection. We are, first off, we're a membership model. There's an initial cost to join. There's no guarantees. We have no service level agreements. And we offer only web care. No phone number you can call. Now, why would a business possibly be interested in something as nutty as that? The answer is we're not initially competing head-to-head with Verizon or Comcast. What we're offering is internet augmentation service. And it's interesting that the moment you start to explain what this means, people get it and they want it. There are 2 advantages to what we offer. The first is no matter what your service level agreement is from Verizon, the fact of the matter is businesses typically at least 1 outage per year and sometimes 2, and basically their employees are cut off. If you have 2 independent service providers and you're load sharing between them, suddenly your net liability goes up substantially. Well, we're the other provider. The other thing that you get by bringing in Netblazer as a second source is you get an immediate speed boost, because most of the edge routers and sonic wall security appliances and so forth that have been sold to businesses in the last 5 years already support 2 or 3 internet providers. So you can very quickly enable load sharing. And that means if you get services from Netblazer, you immediately get a speed boost that's perceived by your employees. So, what are we doing? We are basically incenting businesses to join what's effectively a broadband cooperative, and then we're managing a network on their behalf. The technology is we get fiber upstream from Cogent or Sedera Networks or some other competitive provider at one of those few buildings where competitive fiber is actually available, and then we wirelessly extend this out into a 10-block neighborhood around that building, serving businesses. Each of our customers becomes a relay point, and the technology is sort of interesting. Unlike the mesh networks that that most people are building, we're doing something very different. The mesh networks tend to use omnidirectional antennas. Each radio is sharing the same channel or a limited number of channels, and each radio is interfering with each other, with the next one over. You use packet-based routing to avoid or get around this interference, but basically your capacity is bound up by the fact that every radio is interfering with every other radio. We are doing very short-range point-to-point links with a router at every node. Every one of our customers becomes a repeater. We use 15-degree beams, typical, and if it were easy to show you, I have some pictures of what the sort of typical installations look like, but you go window to window from one person's office to the next office. We bounce up and down the street, bing, 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 one side to the other, and with these direct beams, we're able to turn down the transmit power, reuse the same channel a block away. So we get incredibly, order of magnitude more potential capacity, order of magnitude or more capacity increment over the typical mesh networking approach. But we do depend on members to relay connections from one place to another. And if you have only a single path through various neighbors back to one of our fiber head ends, then I can't promise that your service won't be unreliable. The cleaning lady may kick out the cord at somebody upstream and you go down. So we're only offering an augmentation service. But notice that over time, your node has 3 radios. The second radio is reserved